Hi, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to the June 20th, 2019 Joe Chaffee Weather Show this Thursday. Very busy with severe weather in the east, although there are a few little oddities about this particular round of severe weather, and I'll show you on the radar in a moment. And I think it goes to something that I've been talking about over a number of days regarding these short-term models and how they handle this sort of stuff. Each one has its own vision of what is going to happen. For example, the NAM3 yesterday had hardly anything happening in my neck of the woods. The HRRR had a little bit, but it didn't really pick up on what is actually showing up on the radar. A number of models were showing big thunderstorms down from Delaware down into Virginia, and right now there's kind of a hole there. And then you get into some of the severe thunderstorms that are running through the Carolinas, and this is where the Storm Prediction Center really beefed up their forecast today in terms of their enhanced risk. So let's get moving on what's happening this evening. We have a radar-heavy show tonight, so right off the bat, it is 6 o'clock Eastern Time. So if you are watching this on a replay later on tonight, please remember that this is all dated and that you need to go to your local National Weather Service office forecast page to see what the latest information is, latest radars, latest watches and warnings, if any, by going to weather.gov. Now, no severe thunderstorm watch is up for eastern Pennsylvania to New Jersey and in that area of risk that runs up into the Catskills and into parts of northern New York. The severe thunderstorm watches are posted for southern Virginia, and actually that part of the watch in southern Virginia has been taken away because most of the storms have formed just to the south. Severe thunderstorm watches for eastern North Carolina, down through South Carolina, down through Georgia, and into Alabama, and the radar is sort of bearing that out. We also want to point out that for later on this evening and tonight, we have a large area of slight risk up in the Central Plains into the Rockies, as indicated there. There isn't too much happening on the radar at the moment, but over later on this evening and tonight, it's likely that we'll probably see some activity going on in that particular area. So let's jump to some of these local radar views and take a look at what's happening here. I'm going to start with a wide view of the east. And of course, we have low pressure that is moving across New York State and heading up into New England. And remember, we're shifting a pattern around in the atmosphere. And when you do that, you oftentimes wind up with a violent reaction someplace. Sometimes that the term violent reaction might be more in scope and not necessarily translate down to the surface level. You get these things happening in the spring and in the summer months, and sometimes in the fall. You see them played out in the form of thunderstorms. And this is what's happening. You've got solid rains up through Maine and back through New Hampshire. So that's north of the low center. But in the warm sector, which did manage late this afternoon to push up further north into the Hudson Valley, we have three lines of storms. One that is moving off the New Jersey coast and moving now through Long Island, although in much weaker form. These storms, we had a few severe thunderstorm warnings that played out with this when it moved through southeastern Pennsylvania. We have a large flash flood warning that continues, by the way, for southeastern Pennsylvania and southwestern New Jersey, and that includes Philadelphia and Trenton. And that warning, by the way, was just expanded a bit and extends down into northeastern Delaware. So this is from that first batch that you see off the New Jersey coast. There are two other lines of storms behind it. There's a line that is now moving into northwest New Jersey and into the Catskills, and there's a third line that's up a bit north and west of that, moving into northeastern PA and moving into the northern Catskills and up toward I-90. Just looks like the line just passed Albany and heading into western Massachusetts. I don't see anything as regarding severe weather in those storms. Don't see any warnings that have been put out at the moment, so that's good. And then we also think that it's quite possible that lead line may have juiced a little bit, of taking some of the juice out of the atmosphere. So perhaps the lines that are following won't be nearly as strong. You also have some scattered clusters of downpours and some thunderstorms across northern Pennsylvania and then back into Ohio. Now this is where the upper trough is. You're seeing some downpours and thunderstorms there, and that upper trough swinging eastward. This is the big difference with this system versus the other three that we saw during this week. This one being really the strongest of the bunch and having the most impact over the largest amount of geography. Now there's your hole from southernmost New Jersey down through Delaware and into northeastern Virginia and Maryland. Doesn't really look like there's a whole lot happening there. We've got some scattered heavy cells that are in that area that are moving east. But then you start to get into another big cluster of heavy thunderstorms in southeastern Virginia and in eastern North Carolina. A bit of a gap, and then you get into another snaking area of downpours and thunderstorms into South Carolina and extending down into Georgia, and that's all moving toward the east. We do have a number of severe thunderstorm warnings up in South Carolina, and you be sure if you're watching from there, or make sure you check your local weather service page by going to weather.gov. Here's the mesoscale analysis from the Storm Prediction Center. There's your low. It's sitting up, looks like on the plot, if you want to put it in the center of that closed 998 isobar, it's probably right around Albany. And for a less than 998 low this time of year, that's formidable. And you see the thunderstorms being reflected on the current radar. You also can see that gap that's down from South Jersey into northeastern Virginia. And then you get into the other cells that we see further to the south. And you'll notice here's where your severe thunderstorm watches are, and you've got a number of these blue boxes. We haven't seen any tornado warnings, by the way. They've all been pretty much severe thunderstorm warnings and a couple of flash flood warnings here and there. But we do have a lot of them active right now in North Carolina, South Carolina, and down into Georgia. So this upper trough is doing its job. It's shifting the pattern around. We had very warm tropical air. The dew points were very high. I'm going to put the surface observations on here. It's a little tough to see what the on the map. In fact, I'm even having a tough time seeing it on my screen. But dew points into the 70s, all the way up into central New Jersey, and even to about New York City. We have dew points in the low 70s. Long Island dew points are running right now in the upper 60s to near 70. We had a bit of a marine layer that got trapped here, trying to get that warm front to push on through, and still seeing some patchy dense fog around as a result of that warm front just kind of struggling to get by. But the tropical forcing here was pretty impressive today. So a lot of weather breaking out. And of course, you've got this nice dry air behind it where you have temperatures in the 50s in and around Chicago during this afternoon with the wind coming in off the lake. Gary, Indiana, Chicago. Someone I know of told me that they said it was 58 degrees at around 2 or 3 o'clock this afternoon because they had wind coming in off the lake. But just inland, the temperatures are a bit higher into the 60s. But this is cool air and drier air that's coming in, and it's gradually going to be spreading over into the eastern part of the United States. Now, where is this all going to take us? I want to go to... and I wrote about this on my website if you want to read a bit more. So I brought the graphics up so we can illustrate what is actually going on. I pulled up the GFS analysis from earlier this morning to show you what the jet stream looks like. And you have several players here with deep upper air storms on both on the upper right and on the upper left. and the jet stream suppressed well to the south of normal, where you see all those darker blues. That means that you have lower than normal heights, or basically lower than normal pressures further south. You have we've had this all week. Remember, we've had this east-west stalled frontal boundary. So we today are dealing with the last shortwave trough in the series that is right there in the middle of the country. At least it was earlier this morning. Now, all of this is going to take us into a process where we're going to rearrange all the chess pieces. That trough that's up in the Rockies, that's moving from southwestern Canada and into the Rockies, is driving this change. And the upper low that's in eastern Canada, that is pulling out, and the red line there, that's a shortwave trough that's swinging around. So it's kicking the shortwave that's in the middle of the country. It's kicking it along to the east, getting everything moving, and then as that upper low rotates around, this whole trough is going to bodily pull out into the Atlantic, and that is going to allow the jet stream to change over the weekend and into next week. Now, when we show you this map, it's also a good idea to see what it looks like translated on the satellite. Now, it's not an exact match in terms of time, but it's close enough. But the clouds showing you just what I showed you on the jet stream and how it plays out on the satellite. You can see it better if you pulled up the loop. When you pull up a U.S. loop, you can see all the players in motion and the gears turning and changing. So there's your upper low in eastern Canada. You've got that short wave that is moving across out of the middle Mississippi Valley and into the Ohio Valley, bringing the thunderstorms to the east. And then you have that new trough that's driving down from southwestern Canada that's going to drive into the Rockies and Plain States, and we're going to see severe weather basically shift out to the west over the weekend. Now, going forward with respect to the jet stream, this is what we're going to. So once all those chess pieces are done moving around, the Canadian upper low drops to between Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, deep trough out in the Atlantic around 65 or so west, or maybe even closer to 60 west, and you pop up a big ridge over the east because you have all this troughing out in the west. One of the things that's happening on this is the fact that you have another upper low off the Pacific Northwest coast. So once the system in the plain, once that system moves into the plains, that upper low is going to kick up northeastward, and eventually the upper low that's out to the west in the Pacific is going to drop down. So what that will do through the course of next week is create a much more benign jet stream pattern overall. It will, in my view, what will happen is it's not going to mean picture perfect weather. We are going to see opportunities for showers and storms during next week, but next week's overall look in the east is going to resemble typical summertime, late June, going into July. You're going to have a west-northwest flow coming out of Canada. That flow tends to be mostly on the dry side. Weather systems that come down in that flow tend to be weak, and there will be some that will move along. But in the meantime, I think we're going to spend much of the time next week not raining. We will spend much of the time during the day with some sunshine and temperatures at least up into the 80s. Warm spots, I think, will probably get up close to 90 on any given day, beginning on Tuesday, maybe more than likely later in the week. And there will be scattered showers and thunderstorms popping up, but that's really it. In terms of widespread outbreaks, or in some instances in terms of sitting in low clouds and a wind off the ocean all day, that's probably not going to happen. So I think we're going to be in much better shape next week. Certainly, I think next week is going to be a much better week than what we had for this week, which was, I think, for many areas, north of central New Jersey, it was pretty miserable much of the time. And now next week is this weekend is the first full weekend of summer. and it's going to be a good-looking weekend. And next week should be, for the folks that like summertime weather, I think you're going to be in good shape. Now, in terms of the week systems, here's what I'm talking about. For example, on Monday night, Tuesday, we're going to probably see some kind of weak trough moving eastward, coming out of that northwest flow. It doesn't really have a whole lot with it, but we may see a peppering of showers and thunderstorms, and overall, much of the air in the east will be very warm and humid. One thing to mention is the fact that in areas that have gotten a lot of rain, the soil moisture content is pretty high. We're not in a situation where we've been bone dry and baking the ground day after day. The ground is very moist. This is going to probably hold temperatures back to some degree. So perhaps if we had a dry soil moisture content, we might see temperatures next week rise up into the low and mid 90s. Instead, we'll see them more than likely staying in the mid and upper 80s. So the upside to all this rain may very well be that it will hold temperatures back a bit and not allowing them to get to any kind of extremes. So you see, there's a plus to all this. Now let's look at the weather models with respect to the GFS. I'm going to use the GFS with the radar presentation, and with that deep trough out in the west, we are actually seeing some snow forecast. We mentioned this the other day for parts of the northern Rockies. But this low will pull out, and we are going to see drier air move in. The gradient is actually going to be relatively tight later Friday into Saturday, and that high is going to take its time. So I think we're going to be in good shape even on for Sunday and going into Monday. The question will be, now here comes that next trough approaching for Tuesday. There's not a whole lot with that, at least from the standpoint of the GFS's view. There really isn't much with it. The shower and thunderstorm activity much more scattered in nature. It's not that it isn't around, it's there. I'm just rolling back because I also want to show the threat for severe weather over the weekend. We've got some expected tonight in that large area of slight risk up in the plains, but we do have, with that troughing in the west, come Saturday night and Sunday, we are going to probably see some severe weather in the southern and central plains. But the trough is so far west that that's where it stays. And then it heads up northeastward, up into Minnesota and into the western lakes. Meanwhile, we're great all weekend long. We start to see humidity levels climb as we move into Tuesday and beyond. And there's no real cold front to speak of coming through. You get these weak disturbances moving along in the flow. I think much of next week for a lot of us, as I said, is going to be on the dry side. You start to see a bit of a cold front along about Thursday moving into the western lakes, and that really is about it. Now, how dry are we going to be? And when I say that, when I ask that question, I'm talking in terms of dew points with regards to this weekend. So let's roll back and take you through for Friday. Look at these dew points down in the 50s into western North Carolina. This is by Friday afternoon. You still have 70 plus dew points in southern Georgia and down into Florida, which is what you expect, and across the Gulf states. By Saturday morning, you've got dew points in the 50s and low 60s into North Carolina, dew points in the 40s across Pennsylvania and in New England. Sunday morning, you're looking at dew points still in the low 50s and still in the 50s down into eastern North Carolina. You really don't push those dew points up into the 60s in Virginia, North Carolina until later Sunday night into Monday. And here in the Northeast, we're still seeing dew points here in the 50s on Monday morning. Now, they start to climb going into Monday evening. They start to climb into the 60s. And here's where we have dew points, actually some 70 dew points here showing up on Tuesday. So that's with that trough that's coming through. Probably going to see some thunderstorms with that, even though the GFS doesn't do too much with it. But here's the dew points. You're seeing very warm and you're seeing very humid air going back all the way into the Mississippi Valley. and into the eastern parts of the plains and on up through the Great Lakes. And on Wednesday and now into Thursday, the dew points actually come down a little bit in the northeast on Thursday because you do have a bit of a disturbance going by. So look, the bottom line is, to me, this looks like typical late June, early July type stuff. There's nothing really that stands out too much. And with respect to temperatures, why don't we just take a look at this? Where are we going to find the 90s? Well, on to starting with tomorrow. Well, we don't have it in high temperature map, but we can look at 2 p.m. temperatures. So your 90-degree temperatures are confined to South Carolina, Georgia, and across the Gulf states. On Saturday, they are pretty much in the same place. You've got 70s here in the Northeast and low 80s down into Virginia, North Carolina. Sunday, they do start to come up a little bit into the 80s, but you still have your 90s confined down in Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, and into Florida. Monday, the 90s start pushing up into Virginia, and we see temperatures here on Monday climbing higher into the middle and upper middle 80s at least, although the dew points will still be somewhat contained. Tuesday, your 90-degree temperatures getting close. Wednesday, they start to get squashed a little bit, but we're every bit of into the 80s. And then on Thursday, we see some temperatures up at 90 or better. One thing I would just caution you with respect to the GFS that I've noticed over the last a month or so is that in its longer range, it has been very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Overzealous in showing 90-degree highs, particularly on the statistical guidance that we use. If you Google GFS Moss, you can pull up the GFS statistical temperature guidance, and I've noticed that in its long range, it has been very overzealous and overwarming over the last, at least the last month and a half, pushing 90-degree highs that in some instances we're off by as much as 10 or 12 degrees. So I would just be a little bit careful with how high temperatures get, because a lot of that's going to depend on how much cloud cover you got. And again, remember that soil moisture content. I'm just coming back to the U.S. satellite loop just to, again, emphasize what I showed you before in that still shot, where you have those gears playing in play. You can see the clouds on the upper right. That's the upper low in southeastern Canada, moving east and pivoting around. You can see the clouds over the Great Lakes in Ohio Valley and moving into the east. That is the shortwave trough finally getting kicked out. And you can also see the upper left, the upper low in energy that's coming down from southwestern Canada that's dropping into the Rockies and eventually into the plain state. So all the players here are doing what they're supposed to do to get us out of this mess that we've been in this week and get us into a much better weather scenario for the weekend and for next week. Weather conditions improve from my neck of the woods, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. Weather conditions are going to improve on Friday, maybe some lingering clouds early in the morning, perhaps a few places seeing a few lingering showers, but then we will go to some sunshine. Robert Hurley, wouldn't be surprised to see upper 50s at night for Long Island? Absolutely not. I think we're going to for Friday night, Saturday morning, and maybe even Saturday night, Sunday morning. Jason Schaefer, good point. We don't know all the kinks. I've been sporadically working with the parallel GFS, but not every day. So it is a matter of trying to get used to a new model to see what its quirks are, because they all have their quirks. I did notice, at least from what I saw of the European today, it looked fairly consistent with what the GFS has. There weren't too many big differences, so I didn't really, I really didn't go too deep into the long range, but at least into early next week, it pretty much looks the same. Robert Brown, good. Lady is happy. That's very important. Lady needs to be happy. The dog doesn't like her thunderstorms. My dog loved the thunderstorms. He must be the only dog I know that loved them. Lady got her meatloaf mixed in with her food, and she had 2 treats. Very content. Nice. And you're making me hungry now because I'll have my dinner waiting for me inside. Is that trough going to be cool enough for snow again in the higher elevations for Colorado? Asked Robert Hurley. I don't think that snow's going to get that far south. But before I speak in error, let me just double check. Actually, no, I take it back. The GFS, at least, is actually producing some snow in some of the higher elevations of Colorado, northwestern Wyoming, southwestern Montana, parts of Idaho, and into southwestern Canada. So you know what? I don't know how high you have to go with some of these snow amounts. I'm going to see if I can pull up a sounding, see what kind of elevation I get here, if they tell you what the elevation is on the sounding. I don't see it here on a quick look, but if it is there, when I take it off, actually they do. I can estimate it. I just pulled up a point, an arbitrary point, probably at around 9,000 feet, where the temperature is, which is probably near the top of some mountain. It's 27 degrees there in that particular area. Yeah, I put it right in. I happened to hit a good spot right in the center of the of snow. Lucky me. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking you're probably going to have to go up 6,000 or 7,000 feet or higher to find any snow out in Colorado from that deep trough out in the west. It's amazing how we remember we spent much of the spring with a deep trough out there. With all the cold and snow that they saw in Colorado during the month of May. I haven't heard from Scott Briller, the chairman. He's taking care of his mom. I did hear from him last night. One day at a time, slow recovery. And if I do hear from him later, I'll have to wait till we do the live stream tomorrow to let you know. But he's usually good about jumping on Patreon for the Patreon folks and letting them know. But I will certainly spread the word. And, of course, we do wish his mom a continued speedy recovery. Get ready, because she says she works. She still works, and she has to go back to work. So we need her on her feet. Mirtha Gunter, you had your thunderstorm last night with some 45-mile-an-hour wind gusts, so that didn't last long, which is definitely a good thing. Chuck Gardillo, join on the chat board tonight. Steely Dan, we need to have about a month of dry weather here in Michigan and Ohio. Waters everywhere. I know it's really been out of control with all the rain that we've had. But again, going back to what I said earlier with regards to afternoon temperatures in these very warm to hot patterns that'll try to stay up, that soil moisture content being high. Mine played a role in keeping temperatures down a couple of degrees than they otherwise would be. Michael Azara, I know I saw those dew points up in parts of New Jersey up in the middle 70s. It was a throwback to last September, August and September, when we had that god-awful stretch of humidity. That had to be one of the worst stretches of humidity that I could remember. The air just didn't move. I mean, you couldn't. It was as uncomfortable as I think I have ever felt in a warm, humid air mass up where I've lived on Long Island in 30 years. It was god-awful, and it was day after day after day. It was really very much unrelenting. Chris Alley, nice to see you on board. You've got your weekends all planned out in the summer, I'm sure. Tot Drache, 70s and light rain here in New England. Where in New England, Tot? South, central, or north? It'd be good to know, because I'm trying to, just to see how far that warm sector gets. I don't think it's going to get much further north than southern New England. All right, so thanks for being here tonight. We're going to wrap it up. Let me just let everyone know. If you're on Patreon, what I did this afternoon, and I will make sure that I get that link and keep it handy. I put all the National Weather Service radars on there, and they are in real time. So when you pull them up, you'll get the loop, And if you usually the frames change every 5 or 6 minutes. So if you refresh the page every 5 minutes or so, you will see an updated loop. But I've put every radar from Boston to Albany and then down the East Coast through North Carolina. So when we have these severe weather outbreaks, and a number of you are from all these different areas, and by the way, I also extended it pretty far west back into Pennsylvania and upstate New York, and it'll all be on one page for you. So for Patreon members, check that link I put up late this afternoon and bookmark it and keep it handy because it's always there, so you can always come back to it later on when we get the next thunderstorm threat. Weather in 5 days in 5 minutes. That is tomorrow morning. Usually get that uploaded between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. Eastern Time. I was able to get it there this morning close right around 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I was ambitious this morning and got up early. So look for that. And again, weather permitting, we'll see if we're able to do the Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Otherwise, if we do, I will upload it to YouTube after it's done so you can watch it on the replay. And also it would be uploaded to my free weather app, which you can download on Google Play or on the App Store. Just to search meteorologist Joe Chaffee, or on Google anyway, you can just search Joe Chaffee. All right, folks, thanks for being here tonight. Stay safe in the severe weather. Remember, if you're watching this, it's dated at 6:30 Eastern Time. Weather.gov for the latest information on any watches or warnings that might be up for your particular area. Good night, everybody.